Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Families Together's third town hall, one of 3 of 6, and we will have additional ones. Tomorrow we have the child welfare town hall, and next week we have one on developmental disabilities and on education. Today's town hall is about youth justice. As everyone knows, if you're on this call, you know who Families Together is. Families Together represents the families and young people with lived experience in multiple systems. And one of those systems, of course, is the youth justice system. And so we're very pleased today to be able to welcome again representatives from the DCJS and from the legislature who chair the committees that affect this particular topic. So it's my pleasure to introduce this morning Deputy Commissioner Baycoat, who is from DCJS.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for having me here, Paige and the team here at Families Together. I appreciate you guys inviting me back. That means I must have did an okay job last year that I got an invite to come back. So I appreciate that. My name is Damon Baycoat, and like Paige said, I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Youth Justice here at the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. Our office focuses on several areas of work. We look at reducing racial and ethnic disparities, the mind science of bias, trauma, healing, behavioral health, prevention, youth violence, police and community partnerships, rural-specific issues, youth with sexual problematic behaviors, gender responsiveness, LGBTQ issues, restorative practice, runaway and homeless youth. We also are the agency that is designated by the federal government to work with the Title II funding, which deals with the youth justice systems for the state advisory group, which is called the Juvenile Justice Advisory Group here in New York, and it's the JJAG. And DCJS is the agency that was founded in 1972. So we are going on our 51st birthday this year. We're celebrating. And, you know, DCJS works to enhance public safety by providing resources and services that inform decision-making, improve quality of the criminal justice system. And, you know, people think, you know, DCJS, they think of police and police training, but we also do a lot of community-based work. We work with community-based organizations. We do work with law enforcement agencies and probation departments. We also work with youth justice services, correctional alternatives, and diversion programs and reentry resources, among others that we do as an agency.
Thank you so much, Damon. We're pleased to have you here today. And we're also going to be joined by Senator Bailey. I think he's going to be joining shortly. In the meantime, we'd like to get started with our panelists. As with other years, we have panelists who are family members and young people with lived experience in this particular system. And our moderator today and our first question is coming from Priscilla, who is one of Families Together in New York State staff. So Priscilla.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Priscilla Romero. I'll be today's facilitator for today's Juvenile Justice Town Hall meeting. First and foremost, I'd like to take the time to thank Deputy Commissioner Baycoat and Senator Bailey when he joins us, for taking the time out of the busy schedule to meet with us today to discuss juvenile justice and the concept of juvenile rights. Young people are different from their adult counterparts, and evidence shows our brains is not fully developed until the age of 25. Our youth require a unique system to handle their matters effectively and efficiently. It is important to approach the challenge of juvenile justice system with an open mind, creativity, and innovation. It is imperative that we embrace ideas and methods that are less punitive and more focused on the well-being of young people and their families despite financial challenges. We must have an effective, efficient, and balanced juvenile justice system that prevents juvenile crime, examines the cause of juvenile crime, and supports laws that use diversion and community-based resources. When I was a teenager growing up in New York City, I got in trouble and I was sentenced as a youthful offender, which means that the adult court recognized that I was a young person and my record was sealed. Had this not happened, I could have been denied opportunities for education, employment, and housing. My life could have turned out drastically different. I know this because I have friends who were over the age of 18 when they were sentenced and they were not eligible for youthful offender status. As an adult, they struggle to do the basic things because of a mistake they made while their brains was still developing and are still paying for it today. If an 18-year-old would benefit, so would a 19-year-old, so would a 24-year-old. That's why we strongly support record sealing options to be available for emerging adults like those lined out in the Youth Justice and Opportunity Act. Is this something you support? What else is the state doing to help young people move and grow from their past mistakes?
And that question is for me here as the panelist. So with the Youth Justice Opportunity Act, you know, we at DCJS, you know, we don't weigh in too much on legislation, but we are also supportive of young people, you know, having a second chance. And, you know, we really do believe in reentry, and people make mistakes, and, you know, people should be held accountable for their whole lives for the mistakes that they make. And, you know, here, you know, especially out of the Office of Youth Justice here and our Commissioner, Rossana Rosado, we really believe in, like, how do we help young people get past, you know, maybe some of the worst things that happen to them in their life and be able to move on and be productive citizens. So there've been many programs that we look at. I know our juvenile probation department, you know, does a lot of alternatives to incarceration work. At our office, we're doing projects such as Project Rise. We're looking at healing, and not only healing young people, but also healing the practitioners, because we do understand that, you know, people who work in the system also feel some of those same isms that are in the system, racism, you know, sexism, and all those different systems that affect not only the young people that are in there, but also the people that are working. So, you know, we look at to do something that not only we want to work with young people, we want to also work with the practitioners who are working with the young people, because we understand to start healing, there has to be relationships, right? So the older adults have to be able to have relationships with young people so that young people can start to aspire to be what they want to be. We also understand that giving young people agency and what it is that they are doing, because we know that young people need to feel like they have a chance to make a change in the system. And I think that's what a lot of you guys do with your family navigators, are having people who have lived experience being able to make some of those decisions that help affect not only the system, but the policies in the system. So DCJS, we really strongly believe in that, because that's part of the healing stuff that we're doing. So we really are looking at how do we move the needle. And some of what we're doing is we're actually looking at putting on a healing conference, not only for practitioners, but for young people, to talk about different ways that we can have a larger effect on the system. And not, you know, we understand that there's trauma and there's trauma-informed care, but we also understand that there's a next step. And how do we talk about healing? How do we get young people to be involved in making the changes in the system that need to be made in the system?
I think that's really amazing. And when you have the details for that healing conference, please let me know.
I sure will. We will definitely be sending out all time. We want as many young people to come, because we know that you guys are really the change agents here at the state.
So I'd like to introduce our first ambassador, Angela Colon Ventas.
Priscilla, can I just, sorry to interrupt for a second. I just want to also note that Senator Bailey has joined us. The senator is the chair of the Codes Committee in the Senate, and has been a champion and an ally for families and youth for many, many years. We're very happy to be able to work with him. And he's attended our Family Empowerment Day in the past. Senator, I don't know if you're able to put on your camera or your microphone. If you heard Priscilla's question, if you have anything else to add.
Oh, it was a phenomenal question. Thank you. So I am en route to the office right now. I should be there shortly, and I can put my camera on in a second. But Priscilla, one, thank you for that's a very thoughtful question, and a direct question. What are we going to do about it? Damon can't comment on pending legislation, but the good thing is that as a legislator, I certainly can. I certainly believe in a healing-centered legislation, such as things like, for example, one of the biggest pieces of legislation that we have about making sure that families are together is making sure we get a pay raise for 18B attorneys. Those attorneys who represent individuals who are in family court, individuals who who need counsel, who need a chance to move forward. I'm also the sponsor of the codification of the SNUG Act, and again, Damon knows the SNUG program incredibly well at DCJS. It is guns spelled backward. It's something that that we need to make a law so that we can we don't have to just necessarily wait for the budget appropriation year after year. Most importantly, you know, those who are closest to the pain are closest to the solution, and we have to make sure that we censor young folks in the decisions that we make, and not as a I'm going to use a phrase, as a pat on the head and say, thank you, young person, for attending this random town hall, and we hear you for 15 minutes and then we ignore you. Nah, we can't do that, right? Like, we have to figure out, how do young people have a legitimate seat at the table? How do we make sure that your voices are heard, and that it's a continuing process? Because I think that the only thing that I'm going to ask of everybody here, and I think I'm consistent about asking about it every year, is that this can't be the only time that you engage with your elected officials or your agency folks, right? This just can't be it, right? You know, just like this can't be the only time that we engage with you, this can't be the only time you engage with us, because we need to hear what's happening in the neighborhood, what's going on with the in the community, you know, on an ongoing basis. So I say that to say, like, I'm going to continue to listen. I'm going to get ready to walk into my office soon, so you can see me on the Zoom. But most importantly, I just want to say thank you for always inviting me as a you know, as a part of this day, and you know, making sure that we censor families in our communities first. And you know, I think that if we center the foundation, everything will arise from there.
Thank you so much, Senator. And I'm going to turn it back over to Priscilla to facilitate. But I just wanted to make a comment about both Deputy Commissioner Baycoat and Senator Bailey. You are saying the words that we've been saying for years, and it's so refreshing to hear our words coming out of your mouths, because we know we've made an impact on policymakers when you're repeating to us what we've been saying. So we so appreciate your ears and your empathy and your understanding about what the need is, how important it is. Our philosophy at Families Together, nothing about us without us. You seem to understand very well, both of you. So we so appreciate it. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Priscilla.
Thank you, Senator Bailey, for your response. I just wanted to point out that it's really essential that everybody knows that this is not just a one-time thing, and that you guys are actually in the field with us and hearing our concerns as families and as youth that's been through the system. With this said, I'd like to pass it over to Angela Colon.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I have to admit, this is my first time doing this. I am a little nervous, but I do want to thank everybody for being present and for your time. So as Priscilla mentioned, my name is Angela Colon Rentas. I am a certified professional youth peer advocate who grew up on the east side of Rochester, New York, one of the poorest areas in the city. When I was younger, I was under pins because I was missing school, and my mother was a single immigrant mother who had trouble speaking English. Entering summer school one day, a security officer at a checkpoint unusually demanded a lollipop I had, and then taunted me by making sure I seen him throwing it away. I got angry, which made him angry, and things escalated until I accidentally kicked him in the shin. I was arrested and shipped off to a detention facility where I spent a year there. Towards the end of my sentencing, I was given the choice to go home early, and this might surprise you, but I decided to stay. One, because things at home were still a hot mess, and two, because I was going on my first camping trip. While I was there, I went canoeing, rock climbing, ice skating, bowling, did team building activities, which were one of my favorites. I went to the salon for the first time. We went shopping for clothes a couple times a year. So many fun activities I never got to do while I was at home. I love my mom and I love my family, but looking back, it feels so unfair that the only reason a kid like me from a neighborhood like mine, in a family as poor as mine, could do any of those things is because I was in the juvenile system. That feels so backwards to me. And so I want to know how New York State will help make communities like mine full of enriching opportunities. How will New York State aid communities to become places where youth feel safe and full of enrichment opportunities that are engaging and exciting, so that we could prevent youth from entering the system in the first place? And how will we ensure that it is informed by what the people in those communities want and need? Thank you.
Wow. I mean, that's a great question. And I think, it kind of drives what Families Together is about, right? No decisions without, about us without us there. So I totally agree with you. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm glad that your detention experience was a good experience, because we've heard, other detention experiences not be as good as that. So I'm glad that was good. But it's very interesting because when Governor Hochul's enacted 2023 budget, there was money in there for a project called Project Rise. And through DCJS, and Project Rise is respond, invest, sustain, and empower. And it's just exactly what you're saying, Angela. What we're doing with that $20 million is we kind of use data to go to the cities that were most affected by gun violence. And Rochester happens to be one of those cities. And what we decided to do was give each city $2 million for programming for preventative measures, because we know that we've long enough been pulling kids out of the river, but we want to look at upstream and how do we get those kids before they get pushed into the river, right? And so, but we understood also that the state has done things just by the way that procurement laws and funding and contracts, that there are a lot of non-for-profit, smaller grassroots organizations that are on the ground that are doing great work, but because of the way that there's reimbursement contracts, and even if you get money up front, you have to be able to pay it back, that they just can't receive state funding. And if we're being honest about it, most of those have been Black and brown organizations that have been left out of state funding. There's been inequity in it. So Project Rise decided to look at things differently. We decided to go to each community. Last June, Commissioner Rosado did a listening tour, and we kind of we called it like the musical tour. We were like the Jacksons on tour. We kind of toured the state of New York, and we went to the community and said, okay, tell us, what does a healing and thrive community looks like? How has violence affected your community? What's currently in place, and what are some of the gaps? And then if money was no object, what would you build to help your community thrive? And we got all of these wonderful answers. And, we didn't want to say, okay, we're going to come here one day, ask you all these questions, then leave and never come back. So what we decided to do was, we gathered all the answers. We looked at, what communities were saying, and then we came back. We asked people at that time in June, do you want to be part of a steering committee? And what we decided to was to create steering committees. We wanted to have what we called stakeholders, people who work for the non-for-profits in the cities, but then we wanted to also have 10 community members. All you had to do was live in the community. And that those 20 people were going to make the decisions about what non-for-profits were going to get the money. But the non-for-profits had to understand that they were going to get a certain amount of money, but they were going to have to pass through at least $125,000 to smaller non-for-profits to be able to help build those non-for-profits, those grassroots organizations up that were doing the work to help them build the infrastructure. So eventually when the project is over, that they would be able to, sustain and be able to receive state and federal contracts. So this steering committee said, who are going to be the larger non-for-profits to get it? Then who are going to be the grassroots organizations who are out here doing the work to also receive the money? And what is the target population we want to focus on? And what programming do we need in our city that's unique to our city? So Rochester was definitely one of those cities that has been part of Project Rise. And that actually was our first city to submit an application. So kudos to Rochester for doing that, being ahead of the curve there with everybody. So we are definitely understanding that it has to be a community-driven approach. Like we could have released, like we always do, an RFP, request for proposal. And what we understood is the bigger agencies who are really good at having grant writers and have a pen game, they would receive all the money. We didn't want to do that this time. We wanted to go to community and listen and say, who in your experience has been helping out the most, a larger agency that can receive some of this money, but with the understanding that they would pass at least 25% of that money to the smaller places that are really on the ground doing the work. And then we're going to go back in a year or so and check on them, say, how's everything going? Is everything going well? Did we make the right decisions, or do we need to move the money around? Because we want the community to help us make these decisions, because at the state level, I don't know who's the best people in Rochester, but the community knows who are the best people in Rochester to get the work done.
Thank you for your answer. One thing stood out. You just mentioned that at least 25% should go to the grassroots organizations. And my question is like, why only 25% if that 25% has to be divided into other different ones, which makes it less?
Right. Well, I think what we wanted to do is we didn't want to overwhelm some of the grassroots organizations because they just didn't have the infrastructure, right? If you're just a grassroots organization that has been coming out your pocket, you don't have accounting practices, you don't have back end. If I gave you $1 million, I would be setting you up to failure. Part of what we want to do, what we really want to get out of it is that we want to be able to build these grassroots organizations up. So, so maybe $60,000, $70,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but if that's going to help you be able to start, getting accounting practices, start having, work with grant writers and being able to staff up your programming. So it's just not you out there doing the community work. You're able to have somebody else and give them stipends. So we're starting out that way. Then always things can change as people build up infrastructure, but we really want to make sure that we're setting these smaller grassroots organizations up for success, and we're not setting them up to fail so somebody can come back and say, well, see, it didn't work. We want to make sure it works, and we want to make sure that people are in positions to be successful.
Thank you.
If I can just add, I think that two things, right? Like, it's very important to make sure that there's a track record of an organization that has success, because we run into, as legislators, we run into this catch-22 situation where they say, what's your track record, right? What have you done? Can we get you available funding? Well, we haven't gotten available funding. So we can't give you funding without a track record, right? So with a track record, it starts with a smaller amount. Like, for example, Damon comes out of the SNUG and Mount Vernon program, and that program incrementally grew as it showed how successful it was in the city of Mount Vernon, right? It's like, oh, because on paper, right? And it's the thing, right? Like Angela, you understand, like, that paper is not what reality is, right? But on paper, sometimes things happen, right? They look at a municipality like Mount Vernon. On paper, it's only 70,000 people. The reality, the real count is it's 100,000 people plus in Mount Vernon, right? That's what the census doesn't count, right? On top of that, the inner city concerns that happen within the specific jurisdiction, somebody from that state level doesn't get those things, right? I can only speak about Mount Vernon. You don't understand 3rd Street versus Fulton versus the North Side versus South Side. Like you're not understanding that kind of conversation. I don't know Rochester like that, but I'm sure that they're those inter-neighborhood, conversation that somebody that can deliver specifically for that neighborhood can do it. So they've got to be able to do it and build on a level to scale, right? The second thing is this, right? The importance of electing people who matter, right? This is not a political conversation, and I'm not going to make it D versus R versus I or anything like that. But prior to Samra Brook and Jeremy Cooney being elected in the state Senate, there was nobody in Rochester advocating for SNUG. It just wasn't happening like that, right? They were not advocating. The second that Samra and Jeremy got to the Senate as the chair of the Codes Committee, they knocked them out door and they said, yo, what's up? Rochester needs this money too, right? I'm from the Bronx. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about Rochester. I've been there once in my life, right? All I knew about Rochester was a garbage plate. That's all I knew, right? All I knew. But when you hear from who are similarly situated, it matters who you elect. So this is not a political conversation, but this is a real conversation that if you want more outcomes that are beneficial for communities like yours, make sure that you pay attention to who you put in office that advocate, because you got 2 members in the state Senate that certainly advocate and they put on for the city of Rochester all the time. So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Bailey. Up next, we have our very own parent advisor from Hudson, Charles Anthony Rice. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Senator Bailey, is glad to see you again, and Deputy Commissioner Damon Baycoat. It's always good to be in spaces with you as well. My name is Charles Anthony Rice. I am the Hudson Regional Parent Advisor here at Families Together New York State, and the proud father of 5 children. But before I was any of that, I was a young Black student who was struggling to cope with unaddressed trauma and acted out that pain through anger, which led to incidents resulting in suspensions, and eventually injured a teacher who intervened in a fight that I was having with another student. After that, I was sent to juvenile detention where my trauma was never actually addressed, and my healing journey actually continued well into my adulthood. I am the person I am today, despite my systems involvement. There were so many missed opportunities to help me, but schools, probation, the faculty, in other words, the system didn't see me as a young person in pain, but rather a threat or a statistic. And as a father of 3 beautiful Black boys today, I'm fearful that nothing has actually changed. Those who really helped me were the concerned and active community members who recognized in me their own struggles growing up. Places like Central Village, Dunbar, Southwest Community Centers gave kids like me a safe space, something to do, something to eat, someone to talk to. It's the leaders of faith that and church members hosting block parties and food drives and mentorship opportunities, trade and vocational learning opportunities, neighbors and community members who did all of this for free, who are deeply in touch with what young people like 11-year-old me were going through, as actually Deputy Commissioner Baycoat mentioned. But how can we expect to prevent justice systems involvement when the conditions that lead to crime, like poverty, continue to exist, especially in communities of color? I know that $250 million is appropriated year after year for implementation of Raise the Age, but the state and counties have left hundreds of millions of that money unspent. If that money was available for true, or should I say real community investment, and not left up to county plans, we could truly transform the conditions within those communities. One of the things that was mentioned specifically was this concept of track record. My question is, how is the state going to unlock those funds to finally use the creativity of the local communities and grassroots organizations who may not be able to on paper show that track record, but there are dozens of young men and women who are literally not in positions that they would have been in if that wasn't for a community center, that church, that leader of faith being there. And they may not have the documentation to show it, but there are stories from those communities that say, you know what? We know that this young man or this young woman or this person would not have been here had it not been for this center, had it not been for this church. So how are we going to make those funds available so that those resources are available before our youth become at risk?
So I'll go first with that one. And look, the track record is not something that I'm necessarily even a fan of, but it is within the confines of what we unfortunately exist in, right? There's something about intangibles, right? You know, everything doesn't reflect on the stat sheet. If you know, to use a basketball metaphor, everybody that's a that helps you win a championship game is not going to average 25. That's just not going to happen, right? But unfortunately, on paper, the system that we have now is that you have to be able to average 25, 10, and 10 in order to be able to get a contract, right? It's not right. I don't agree with it. But I think that there is I think there is something to speak for about in some cases. I will say that the track record method is helpful because, again, I use specific Mount Vernon Snug 209 as an example of something that was scalable and built up as it showed its efficacy in its ability, right? But you have to be able to believe in it, have something to believe in. And in some of these organizations, like, in order for the state to send money, that there has to be an EIN, there has to be some sort of information or something that the state can send to a not-for-profit, right? Now, can some organizations go under the umbrella of a not-for-profit and maybe work out a partnership like that? That is something that happens in certain areas, like Good Shepherd Services, right? Good Shepherd Services is funded by the state, and under the realm of Good Shepherd Services, you have Bronx Rising Against Gun Violence, which is BRAG, which is another anti-violence prevention coalition. So maybe that can be a creative strategy to there. Bottom line, Charles, is that I agree with you, and this is something that we should be trying to endeavor to fix. I don't know if that's a legislative fix or if that's an agency rulemaking fix, right? I think it may be somewhere in the middle of both. But I can understand the rationale behind wanting to make sure that you're sending money to an organization that is certified. But I also know for a fact, like I got an organization in the neighborhood that this dude from public housing. He teaches kids chess. He doesn't have a C3, doesn't have anything, but what he's able to do with his kids are nothing but short of amazing. but he's not eligible for funding, right? So we also have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, get him up to speed in terms of how to be able to get that kind of get that thing, but while we can plug him in with an existing organization so that they can flourish and grow. That's not necessarily the answer that probably we wanted, right? But I think that's the answer that we can continue to look forward. And listen, I don't know if Deputy Commissioner Baycoat would have an agency level view of that. So.
And I think, thank you, Senator Bailey. And I think part of it is that it is difficult. And Charles, I do understand that money goes out for those county plans. And I think there was a couple of things that happened, right? Like the money when I raised the age happened, 2018, 2019, those plans happened, then COVID hit, right? And it put us all into a scramble. And even now, talking to the people for probation, because some of that money comes through probation, but it also comes through DSS as well, is that, we're figuring out a system that we can review those county plans sooner so we can get that money out the door sooner as well. And the counties are going to be reimbursed for all the services that they have done, even though if it takes a while. So I definitely get that, this has been a slow process, and nobody in the community wants to hear about a slow process because things don't happen slowly in the community. I hear you mention the places, Southwest Community Center in Dunbar. I'm assuming Syracuse, if I'm right? I spent enough time on the road that I know these places. And, going back to kind of what you were talking about is that Syracuse, once again, as you're talking about communities making decisions, it has a different dynamic than any other state in the any other city in the state, because you're talking about Syracuse is kind of broken up into those quadrants, right? Like the Southwest, and if you're from the 110, you can't go over to the Brick Town, and who has alliances here and there, and so so I could have community services in an area that a young person can't travel to, because that's how the city of Syracuse's dynamic is, right? So it's really important that we make sure that the people on the ground are helping us make some of those decisions. And interesting enough, as we're working Project Rise, Syracuse is definitely another community that's Project Rise that is led by the steering committee. Their plan is definitely to have what services are in each quadrant so that we can make sure that mental health services just aren't in, and I can't remember the streets now, but where the Southwest Community Center is, right? They need to be somewhere else on the east side of town where those young people can access it as well. And so their plan is very comprehensive about that. And so, part of what Senator Bailey is saying is absolutely correct. And just so I can break down what we're doing at Project Rise, we've decided to look for 4 larger non-for-profits, give them each about $500,000, and then take those smaller grassroots organizations that you're talking about, Charles, and put them under their umbrella and let them sub-allocate the money to those smaller places so that those smaller places now can have some of the infrastructure built up to be able to do the work. And as you talk about, your healing journey, I think about what we kind of teach our snug folks. We ask our snug folks, every day, have you rapped with your young people that you're working with? And rap to us, as we're celebrating 50 years of hip hop, really means, have you built a relationship with that young person? Have you helped that young person aspire? Have you given that young person agency, right? Have you helped them be able to make decisions about their future in their community? And then also, have you given them purpose? Because we know if you rap with a young person every day, that you will be building a healthy young person that you'll help them out, heal some of the trauma that they have, because we do live in communities, and we talk about PTSD. I talk about continuous trauma, right? Because we don't ever get a chance to move past something that happened right before the next thing happens. And then the next thing happens, and it's compounded and compounded. And now you have a young person walking around with all this compounded trauma. So, we want to be trauma informed, but we also want to be talking about how we can help our young people heal in some of these communities. And the first thing I know is that we have to get our community safe. And the only people who know how to keep their community safe are the people who live in those communities. So yeah, there is a lot of money still on the table from the Raise the Age, but we are looking at innovative ways to be able to get money to some of those smaller grassroots organizations and being creative. I think about Rochester Project Rise. One of the things that they're doing equestrian things with young people, using horses as therapy and letting young people ride horses and giving them these experiences that they wouldn't normally get. So, there's all these new innovative things that are coming out, and we're finding ways to funnel money to these new innovative things to make sure that young people are not only, getting a chance to get these services, but exposure, right? Because I know that I live in Mount Vernon, and a lot of kids in Mount Vernon have never been to Midtown Manhattan, right? Which is literally 3 or 4 miles away. but because your community, your neighborhood is your neighborhood, that's where you stay. And Charles, being from Syracuse, I know you understand that dynamic even more than most of us on this call here. So I think, we are looking as a state of innovative ways. And I always, really give a lot of kudos to my commissioner, Commissioner Rosado, who kind of, thought about this idea with Project Rise to say, how can we change the dynamic? How can we get the people on the ground? How can we hear from the community about what they need? So, we are working and the government does move slow, but we are headed towards the right direction.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I just have a really quick follow-up question for Senator Bailey. You mentioned specifically a gentleman who is teaching young people within the community how to play chess, but he doesn't have certain documentation, or for example, we'll just use the word track record to prove like, hey, this is actually working. You can see it, that it's working, but there may not be a paper trail to show that it's impacting the community in a way in which it is. My question to you is, what steps are being taken to ensure that this gentleman can actually have the supports and resources he needs in order to maybe not be under the umbrella of another nonprofit, but be able to stand on his own feet? Because again, we understand, especially as people of color, there's a fear that when we start something, it's going to be taken away from us. And there may be that fear there of, hey, I started this, but somebody else wants to now put their name on it. What steps are being taken to ensure that this gentleman has the resources and supports that he needs in order to maybe get a 501c3 or the information that he needs in order to be able to continue doing what it is that he feels like he was called to do?
So specifically speaking with that individual, that I told him multiple times, you got to, we can get you to an attorney. A law student in a law clinic can help you draft articles of incorporation and get it to the Secretary of State. We can help you get under this umbrella. You just like to do your own thing, then you like to do your own thing. Like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. He does amazing work, but if he doesn't want to be under the umbrella so that he can have his own umbrella one day, that's his choice. He does phenomenal work, specifically in that situation, right? But there has to be a level of, I don't want to say trust, because I know, like you said, it's hard to trust people because you feel like they might take it away from you. But at the state level, we just don't have discretionary funds that we can just give to organizations that just say, hey, we're doing good work, right? Like we just can't do that, right? I wish that it didn't have to, that you didn't have to have the EIN and you didn't have to have the be incorporated. I wish that wasn't the case, but those are the confines under which we operate. And until, either that specific process changes or people get certified, like I don't know how else to change it. But no, specifically with that brother, like, no, we've tried multiple times. I got elected in 2016. Since 2017, we've been saying, bro, I cannot give you this money, because if I send this to they're gonna say, what's the EIN? He doesn't have one. And then it's gonna be like, oh, you're not doing that. And then as members, you have like state level, right? Like members from New York City have different discretionary funds and different municipalities have different ways that they do it at the municipal level of government. State money moves kind of slow, right? Just gonna put it out there. It moves kind of slow. So if you're looking for like an immediate infusion of cash, I think that money that money I gave to Snug, I think when I first got elected, it was finally going through, and that's been like, I don't know how long, right? So like even if you are a certified organization, so that's another problem in the fact that the state money moves kind of slow. And if you're a fledgling organization, if you're on your own and you're waiting for that check, so to speak, that check's not coming from the state in any timely fashion, right? Like that's just a reality. That's the reason why like that's why the system's kind of messed up in some ways, because the umbrella organizations that can bear the brunt of that cost, are the ones that can help out. So.
And Senator Bailey and Charles, I'll just jump in there. Part of what we saw at Project Rise is we do know this, right? Because state contracts are reimbursement. So you put the money out front and then you get the money back on the back end, after 3 or 4 months. And most smaller non-for-profits just don't have that type of money to put out there. But part of what we're doing under Project Rise is that not only are we saying that the larger non-for-profits have to give the smaller non-for-profits money, we're saying that you have to help them build their infrastructure. So just like in this case where, with the chess, that was a Project Rise smaller non-for-profit, that larger non-for-profit would have to help them get their 503c, right? And then on the state level, from what my staff is doing, is that we're going to host, quarterly meetings to have people understand the process, because it's one thing to say go get it, but if you don't understand the process, how you have to sign up for the charity bureaus, right? Like how you have to register your EIN number, how you have to be part of the gateway management system and all of those different places, then even if I tell you to go do it, it's going to sound like I'm speaking a foreign language to you. So, part of what Project Rise is, when we talk about empower and sustain, is really looking at those smaller non-for-profits and say, we're going to give you all the tools to get to where you need to get to. And that would be, really what we want to do is not only give you the tools, but we want to bring them to you, because we do know that it is scary. And when you're talking about dealing with state government, because no matter if I tell you I live in Mount Vernon, or I come and I can tell you everything about Syracuse, when I come in, I'm representing the state. And so you want to make sure that you're saying the right thing to me, because you feel like I'm representing the state. So we understand that we want to make sure that we're bringing those tools to those people and helping them walk through the process as much as we can. And we're also tasking these larger non-for-profits that are getting a good chunk of this money as well, that you have something to do too, because part of your work plan measurables are, how did you engage with those smaller non-for-profits and how did you help build them up? Because we're going to hold you accountable to receiving some of these funds.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I think that it is essential that, these larger not-for-profit help make the pavement for these smaller not-for-profits so that they can benefit the community and the people that they serve. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it on to Tanya Hernandez.
Priscilla, if you don't mind, I'd like to just highlight a few things that we were sharing in the chat to provide context for folks. And I really appreciate this conversation and the focus on small nonprofits and the barriers to entry that small nonprofits like the one we're describing experience. And we want to see things like, for instance, there's only $325 million of the over $1 billion allocated to Raise the Age that's actually been spent by the state in these communities. And for all the different things that we're talking about, that Charles is uplifting, that Senator Bailey and Deputy Commissioner Bacote are mentioning, there's a lot of potential there. And so we're really hopeful that that money is released. We've been working with Assembly Member Szilagyi to try to figure out some strategies so that community members can not have to go through county plans, who then have to go through the state approval process, to then go back to county to then get that funding, right? Like there's so many barriers, and that's part of the reason we think that state funding is so slow, especially in the context of Raise the Age. And so we want to find a way so that community members can apply directly for that funding, or community-based organizations, because they like has been so clearly laid out, they're the ones that know what their neighborhoods need, what their blocks need. We also support the creation of something called the Child and Family Wellbeing Fund. This is born out of the child welfare space, but we know even the way that the state children and families agency is laid out, youth justice and child welfare really go hand in hand, right? And so the creation of a family-driven or community-driven child and family well-being fund, where they identify the assets in their community, and then they decide how a pot of money could get spent to build up and grow those community-based organizations so that they can continue to do the work, and the state gets to be a supporter of that rather than dictate what communities get. So we really love the conversation that's happening here. I agree. I think we're moving in the right direction. And as parents and young people advocates, we're always going to be a little impatient and want to push this along as fast as we can. So just wanted to uplift some of those things. And Priscilla, I'll send it back to you.
It was just put in the chat that Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, Newburgh, Yonkers, and Mount Vernon are all Project Rise cities. I'd like to pass it on to Tanya Hernandez. You're mute.
There you go. Now you can hear me. Hello, everyone. My name is Tanya Hernandez, and I'm from Buffalo, New York. I am currently the Western Region Family Policy Advisor But before that, I was an advocate in the juvenile justice system for 14 years. And even more importantly, I was a parent who navigated the juvenile justice system twice. And I got to be honest, I was lost. I was completely confused and scared to lose my sons to the streets or this system. In retrospect, a peer advocate on my side would have made such a difference in reducing my feelings of isolation, my fear, my confusion, stigma. My question, I guess, is how will DCJS and the legislature allocate funding for parent and youth peer advocates so that families and young people could find assistance, advocacy, support from someone who has lived experience so that they never have to go through what I went through?
I'll take that question first, Tanya, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. It's part of the system, and I think what you say it makes perfect sense. Is that there should be somebody there that helps navigate the system. I mean, I know they do it at the school level. Sometimes when you have an IEP, there's usually a parent advocate for you at those IEP meetings. At times, in some places, I will say that with DCJS, we don't control like what the money is. We do, we do go out and look for different grants and things like that. So I know for us, we did 2 years ago, we launched what we call the Policy Equity Academy with probation departments. And that Policy Equity Academy, worked with probation departments, and we looked at adjustment for young people. And we know that young people of color, especially Black boys, at adjustment were driven deeper and deeper into the system. And so we wanted to look at those different probation. We wanted to look at probation departments had an application out, and we took 5 probation departments that had that completed the applications, and we wanted to look at their policies that were driving some of these young Black boys deeper and deeper into the system. And because of the way that the system is set up, with some structural racism and things that we know that happens. So we put our probation officers, with probation departments and we made them team up with judges, family members, and different people in the community, and they kind of went through what we call the Policy Equity Academy, and where they talked about implicit bias. They talked about the system and kind of how we got to the places that we got to. And then from there, we had them develop a capstone project to say, take a look at your policies that might be driving these young Black boys deeper and deeper into the system. And one of the places Schenectady Probation Department decided to just that, right? Use the kind of credible messenger model to have a family advocate, a family navigator at the probation level to help families, because we know that people from the community, there's some built-in trust. I come from, as Senator Billy mentioned, I come from the snug world, and we know that credible messengers are huge in helping people navigate through some of their trauma and some of their issues with the system. So, some of the departments did look at this community navigator in their probation department, hire a credible messenger, somebody that has some lived experience to help families navigate through the system. If nothing else, introduce them to the right people, make sure that they're, getting the services that they needed. It obviously, we're still in the very beginning stages of it. This is 2 years ago, but this is something we're definitely looking at, because we do understand that there has to be people that are from the community that are helping people navigate. And that was one thing we did here was, it would be great if there was a one-stop shop, right? Because we know that when you're in distress and you've got 10 different cards, who do I even call? Right? Like, do I call probation? Do I call the police? Do I call social service? Who do I call because my family's in distress? And so one of the things we heard from the community, all 7 communities we went to, is it would be great if there was a one-stop shop where somebody could, help people. You would just go there and they would help navigate to wherever you needed to go in that time of crisis. So you didn't have to figure out whose card you needed to pick up and call. So we are at least having that conversation. We haven't gotten to the point where we're in full implementation, but we are having that conversation. I think you're still on mute.
Here I am, and it was really good. I said I was also going to mention that it's important to remember we don't just have a youth in the system, we have an entire family. And until we look at this holistically as a whole, we're always going to have missing pieces. And this is where advocates and peers come in because they've lived it, they understand it.
Agreed.
So thank you so much for this. And obviously we support family peer support being in every possible system. We don't think that there's a single door that families and young people walk through where they don't need someone who's been there before at their side and helping them navigate this. So we really would love to see the juvenile justice space take very deliberate and intentional steps towards funding family peer advocacy, youth peer advocacy for justice involved young people or young people at risk. And so we appreciate your comments, Deputy Commissioner. Before we close, I wanted to send a question specifically for Senator Jamaal Bailey, who is the sponsor and the introducer of the Right to Remain Silent bill, which we strongly support. Senator, this is more of an opportunity for you to talk to our audience about why this bill is important, why you chose to introduce it. So feel free, if you could just explain a little bit about what it is and what inspired you to push this bill forward.
So thank you, Brad. So the Right to Remain Silent Act is I don't have the bill number off the top of my head. I wish I did, but it is related to the experiences of the exonerated five Black men who were accused of heinous activity that they absolutely had nothing to do with by virtue of simply being young, Black, and in Harlem and daring to be, in the presence of people that didn't look like them, right? So, as you know, or if you don't know, the then they were called the Central Park Five because they were accused of misconduct with the young white woman who was running in the park. It was later found that they did nothing of the sort. And that their confessions were coerced, and by virtue of the fact that they did not have counsel, they did not have knowledge, and when you are under pressure, you are more likely to say things that you don't necessarily mean. 1099, that's 1099. Yes, thank you, Brad. That you don't necessarily mean, or that you don't understand the gravity or the weight of what the confessions are. Simply saying yes, or saying, yeah, I did it, or leaning like something like that you think is going to be okay. It will not sometimes be okay when you when you confess to something that could have you be incarcerated. And many of these young men were incarcerated for quite some time for something that they did not do. And so the Right to Remain Silent Act is youthful interrogations, making sure that before a young person, underage individual under the age of 18 is going to be able to speak to police, that they have counsel, that they have someone that they can speak to, so that they can understand the gravity of what they've done. Now, we want to make sure that a couple things that we explain, a couple of things, that we're not looking to stop law enforcement from doing their job to protect victims and protect the public. That is not what this is intended to do. This is not intended to stop any police department from being able to stop individuals who are intending malice upon our communities. We all want freedom, we all want justice, but we all want safe communities, and we all want individuals who are doing the wrong things to be held accountable, right? We certainly want that. I think that's fair to say. However, what we don't want is coerced confessions, that when you say something to a young person that doesn't understand the gravity of the question that's being asked, that they say, yeah, sure, that yeah, sure could be a confession. That yeah, sure, you might mean it in a colloquial way, like, yeah, whatever, man. But that yeah, sure could be an affirmative statement towards a confession. We want to make sure that you have counsel to understand the gravity of what, that you have counsel there so that they can explain the gravity of what's happening in the room. And also for the parents, because Tanya, you mentioned it's a parental conversation as well. And just because someone is a parent doesn't mean that they're equally as well schooled in the justice system as well. They may have similar circumstances and things like that. For example, I am an attorney by trade, right? But you know, if you are looking for a tax attorney, don't call me because I can't help you. Just because I'm an attorney doesn't mean I know tax law, right? Don't call me. Don't call me for anything, but don't call me for that, right? So just because someone is in the age of majority doesn't necessarily mean that they also understand or that they're schooled in the ways of what the justice system could be. So it's to protect parents, it's to protect children, but most importantly, it's to protect our community. And the last thing I'm going to do before I jump, because I have a 12 o'clock Zoom, I'm going to plug Clean Slate. Clean Slate by Senator Zelma Omari and Assemblymember Catalina Cruz is, you know, we talk a lot of the underlying concerns that we have are economic justice, right? You know, nobody's going to go back to the block if they got a job. Like that's just the reality. That's just the understanding. If you have gainful and meaningful employment, you are not going to look towards nefarious or potentially nefarious activity to be able to take care of your kids or to be able to take care of your family, and that you can actually break these cycles of generational poverty, because we have cycles of generational trauma, cycles of generational poverty, and we have people who are proud people and who are going to do what they need to do in order to get what they want to get. I'm not advocating for it. I'm not saying you should. What I'm saying is that we have to be understanding and realistic about what folks will do if we're not willing to give them a meaningful, not just a second chance, not just a, hey, let's give you kind of, you know, whatever, a meaningful opportunity at actual reentry to the workforce. And with that being said, I'm going to jump for my 12 o'clock. I thank you for always, you know, inviting me. You know, I'm looking forward to these things always. I'm going to put my Senator Jay Bailey at nysenate.gov. If anybody wants to get in contact with me, that's Senator Jay Bailey at nysenate.gov. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I regrettably have to leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you so much for joining us again. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Deputy Commissioner, I wanted to just follow up on a comment that Tanya brought up about family peer support and youth peer support. As we described earlier about, you know, nothing about us without us. The other thing about peers, beyond just being able to help shape policies that affect our families and our young people, is that we can be support to people going through the system or trying to avoid going through the system currently. We know that people who have that lived experience can develop a level of trust and credibility with their peers that other people with tons of letters after your name cannot, you know, and tons of like state emblems or county emblems on their business card cannot. So what we've done in the mental health system and in the addiction system and now in the child welfare system is to have paid family peer advocates who are trained and credentialed to be able to provide that kind of support. And that's what Tanya's role is, when she described being the Western Region Family Policy Advisor. That's through OCFS, through a grant that Families Together has to implement family peer support in the child welfare system. And we're working with folks over at OCFS to try to do the same for the juvenile justice system. And we look forward to working with you as well on doing that.
Yeah, no, I definitely look forward to, because I strongly believe in it. I mean, and that's what we've done with the gun violence work as well, is understanding that there's step peer support. And, you know, I always tell everybody I'm a MSW, but I couldn't even reach some of the kids that our snug workers reach, right? Like, because of who their background and their experience and that trust that's built in the community for somebody who has lived there and been there and done it. So I agree 1,000%. So I definitely look forward to working with you guys on any of that.
Thank you. And we've one other thing about family peer support and youth peer support is that it's a Medicaid billable service, and now is billable if someone is on Child Health Plus. So that's a lot of our population, right, that has access to CFTSS services through Medicaid redesign. So it's an opportunity for counties to be able to implement it and not have the entire cost be on the state, because they can bill Medicaid.
Yeah. No,
Brad,
have a
just
deeper conversation about all of this.
thank you so much. Brad just put in the chat to remember that tomorrow we have the child welfare town hall at 11 a.m. and we look forward to seeing everybody back here tomorrow. thank you again, Deputy Commissioner. And thank you especially to all the panelists who are our ambassadors who ask the questions and put their own personal stories out there to help illustrate the issues.
Thank you for having me. And thank you, panelists. I appreciate it. Thank you for the great questions.